Hello and welcome to September's Bloody Scotland Book Club. Tonight's guests are Gordon McGhie, also known as award-winning blogger Grab This Book. In hindsight, Gordon says he wishes he'd chosen the blog name, which doesn't mean he gets called Grab. We also have Anna Day, who's been a book festival organizer, book festival manager, and is currently culture manager for Perth and Kinross Council, and Sara Aldebe, who is a bookstagrammer and bookseller based in Glasgow. And this month, the books we're talking about are Under the Marsh by G.R. Halliday, The Skeleton Key by Erin Kelly, and Rivers of London by Ben Aaronovich. On the face of it, three very different books, but I think as the discussion unfolds, we will maybe see a few unexpected similarities cropping up. So we're starting with Under the Marsh, the third in Gareth Halliday's Highland Set series. Very quick intro to it. 12 years ago, D.I. Monica Kennedy caught the notorious serial killer Pauline Tosh, imprisoning her for life. When Pauline asks Monica to visit her at the remote Highland Carslang prison, the detective thinks she's playing games. But then Pauline hands her a hand-drawn map with a cross marking the desolate marshlands near Inverness, and Monica can't ignore it. She was always convinced that there were more victims out there, and when a body is discovered, it looks like they've found a new name from Pauline's kill list. But things are never that simple. And here is Gareth with a reading to whet your appetite.
I'm G.R. Halliday, also known as Gareth, and this is my novel Under the Marsh. It opens with a young woman called Freya back in 1994. She's planning to run away from home in the early hours of the morning with a group of friends, but when she goes outside from her remote house, instead of the familiar Volkswagen Golf, she finds an unfamiliar van waiting in the quiet road. The silent van under the tree wasn't how she'd imagined this moment. An expectation of excitement, laughter with her new friends as they piled into the car together, life opening up for them all. Freya hesitated and took a deep breath of the night air, the smell of moss from the forest, wood smoke drifting from somewhere far away. She had an odd sense of timelessness, as if she could easily have drifted back hundreds of years into the past. Her skin crawled, and all her instincts told her to turn round, leave her suitcase in the long grass beside the road, and run back to the house. For a second she hesitated, and then she imagined waiting for the bus to go to work at the amusement arcade on Castle Street in Inverness the next morning, doing it every day for the next year, for the next 10 years. She stepped closer to the van, feeling the dew from the grass soaking her trainers, and tapped on the door. The metal panel was cold to the touch. There was no response at first, but she could hear a vague noise from the van's interior, a murmuring as if someone was talking to themselves, or had a radio on at a very low volume, a hint of light from the gap at the bottom of the door. "Hello? It's me." Freya's voice sounded young, frightened in her own ears. She cleared her throat as another wave of indecision rose from her stomach. Why hadn't they mentioned coming to collect her in a different vehicle? But if it wasn't her friend, then what were the chances that someone else would just show up? Of course it was them. She forced herself to bang harder on the metal. The voice inside stopped. The lights went out. Freya hesitated, unsure what to do. Maybe they're not sure it's me. Maybe. The door rolled open with a sound of metal on metal. It was darker inside the van. There was a reassuring smell of menthol cigarette smoke though, and without thinking, Freya heaved her suitcase inside. She hesitated again, then climbed into the van. The door rolled shut behind her. The light clicked back on. As her eyes adjusted to the unfamiliar space, Freya's breath caught in her throat. The shock of adrenaline flowed through her body. She scrabbled at the door, searching for the handle. It was already much, much too late for any of that.
Okay, so very atmospheric to start us off. In case you think I'm some random person who's wandered in off the street, I'm sorry, I did forget to introduce myself. Margaret Kirk, hi. Okay, so Sara, if I can come to you, thoughts about Under the Marsh?
So, Under the Marsh, it's a very atmospheric Highland police procedural, and it reminded me a lot of Swedish crime fiction, which I loved. So yeah, it's a very dark and atmospheric one, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think what I got from it was very definitely a sense of place. I think you can tell that the writer is very fond of the Northwest Highlands and the scenery around that area, and very atmospheric, very great sense of place. Anna, would you like to come in? Thoughts on?
Yeah, so I mean, I did enjoy it. I think for me, it actually probably came out the poorest of the books that we're going to talk about tonight. It felt like the most formulaic. There was lots of things I loved about it. So I loved that, as you say, the sense of place was beautiful, and I loved the sort of edgy relationship between the detective and the serial killer. I haven't read anything by this writer before. And I suppose the big test of a book is, do you immediately want to go and read all the backlist, all the things that got you to this point? And I'm not sure that I would rush to, but I also wouldn't turn them away if they turned up on my desk. And I know what Sara means about that sort of Scandi noir sort of comparison. There's writers, the Icelandic writers particularly, it had that echo of the sort of the darkness and the marshes, with that Icelandic, the volcanic kind of sort of vibe that some of those books give off. So yes, I really did get lots of good things from it, but I think for me it suffered a little being, in it amongst the other books that we're talking about, which were so unusual, and we'll obviously come on to those books later, but and this felt like a really good but quite a pedestrian crime novel.
Right. What about the main character, Monica Kennedy? Because she seems a slightly unusual female protagonist, and her relationship with Crawford. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I like that, and I wondered whether I would have enjoyed it more. I did enjoy it, but whether I would have got more sort of out of it had I read their introduction and known where that was coming from. So
I definitely feel like you needed the backstory from the other books.
Yeah,
right.
To really get the relationship between the characters and such.
I totally agree, Sarah.
I think it does make it clear there is an affection, which I guess that kind of that my reference at this point is moonlighting because I'm old, but it's that will they won't they seems to play through, and I think if you did it for books 1 and 2, that sense of tension might be slightly more amplified. But this was also my first book. I would go back and read it. I enjoy it. I did think that perhaps we missed out on the build-up a wee bit, but I was engaged in the characters, which more so than perhaps some of the other books we read. I liked Monica. I thought she was a really good central character to focus around. I liked the fact she didn't quite fit in to her surroundings maybe a wee bit. References to being from down south and working in London as well, but the relationship there, you probably benefit from having gone in. That's the problem when you jump into book 3 in a series. You do miss a little bit of the backstory, but I did feel there was enough in there to let me know where we were at by the time we reached this book, so we could pick up quite easily.
Yeah, and it's always a difficult balancing act, I think, when you get into a series, how much backstory the writer gives you. Too much, and you think, I don't need to know all this, or I know all this. Not enough, and you're left wondering, well, I don't quite understand how these people fit together. I'm struck by the 3 books, and I did notice some similarities, and I very much like the little Gothic touches throughout the book, like the hanging tree and the coffin necklace. I thought that was fantastic. Gordon, anything else that stood out for you?
Yeah, we've talked. The books are all very different. So this is the sort of the more, I suppose, traditional. It's a police story. There's a dead body. We're trying to work out who was responsible for the dead body, and you've got a proper investigation going on. As some of the other books, they take a very different approach to crime. Which one of the reasons that we're looking at the books we have is we're looking for slightly unorthodox crime stories. So that's good. But from my point of view, I grew up in the areas where he talks about. So this really sung to me. There's towns in here. I thought, oh yeah, Beaulieu, Munivard, Inverness. My old stomping grounds. So
yeah,
that just gives you a much better connection with a story. No matter how good the story is, you get more from it because you know the places. You recognise some of them are not real. Some of them probably are. But it just gives you a little bit extra. So I got a boost from that personally because of my relationship with the place names. And it's always nice when you grow up in a place called Munivard. It's nice to see it in a book. You're like, yay, that's cool, I know that. So stuff like that, it does make a difference. I'm easily pleased.
Yeah. I mean, the witch's coffin is a real place, and it is slightly spooky down there, very, very definitely. Yeah. I mean, how did you feel the sort of dual timelines worked? How did that work for you, Sarah? Sorry, Sarah.
It's all right. I love a dual timeline, mostly because it gives me enough time to not get bored of one timeline. And it keeps the interest up because obviously it prolongs the story, and it also gives more depth. So I really enjoy the dual timelines and how it ties together in the end. So I enjoyed that.
And
other dual timelines coming up as well, so it's a bit of a theme.
Yeah.
So this one didn't lean on it quite so much as the next bit we're going to come to, but I with dual timeline if it's not immediately obvious where you are, because I'm a bit of a speed reader and I don't always take in all the details. So sometimes you're going, right, who are we? Where are we? What's going on? And you got to sort of stop and take stock. I didn't feel that was an issue here because the dips to the past weren't particularly lengthy.
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah.
Current, but you would step back, get a little snippet just to fill in a gap or take you where it's going to go next. So I quite enjoyed that element of it. So that worked for me, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives another layer of complexity to the plot, and just a couple of comments coming in from Facebook. Marion says that she really enjoyed the opening. She thought it was very chilling, and another comment I've seen is the slightly chilling the villain, the very, very sinister ex-comedian. I thought the echoes there of ex-comedians in the media recently. I thought that was definitely very chilling.
Yeah, he was quite a dark one. That suddenly came into the story. You're like, oh, he's
yeah.
I quite like that randomness of just suddenly there's a whole new big bad, and they were very unpredictable, which made it more fun as well because there was almost a lunacy there, I think.
Yes, definitely. Very, very disturbing villain. So, and of course, Pauline. our locked up serial killer. Some very, very disturbing moments there. Pauline, Anna, what did you think about Pauline?
Yeah, I mean, I thought she created a real sense of, as you say, danger and tension, despite the fact that she was, you know, of limited actual danger, because she is a woman who is locked up. So, you know, and there's security guards and things around. So there is a limited amount that this woman can do. And it's not like she's some sort of crime uberlord that can get people on the outside to do anything. That's not the persona that that has been created there. So, but she still managed to create a sense of menace and tension with this person, with this woman, despite all that. So yeah, I think he did a really good job with that character. And I suppose that's where the book stood out a wee bit for me, is that relationship between the detective and the serial killer was a bit different to anything I've come across before.
I got the impression that Pauline Tosh had been in an earlier book, so there was a whole big story there we missed. So I think perhaps if you're a returning reader, having done the earlier ones, you'd have got a lot more from her scenes. But even just from a first-time reader point of view, you're looking at going, okay, she's quite creepy. She's a wee bit, you know, there was a definite sense of menace, as you say, despite the fact she was limited in what she could do. So, you know, there was that. I think if I was going back, and I will go back and read the earlier books, I'll be seeking out the one where she features, because she was creepy, and that's what I want to be reading. I want to be reading stories that kind of unsettle as well. So, yeah.
And of course, the female serial killer is unusual, so that does grab our attention. Okay, so that was Under the Marsh. So now we're going to look at the skeleton key. So a very quick intro to it. Starts in summer 2021 with Nell coming home at her family's insistence to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of her father's creation of the Golden Bones. Part picture book, part treasure hunt. It told the tale of Eleanor, a murdered woman whose was scattered all over England. Excuse me, I've dropped my... There we go. Right. Clues and puzzles in the pages of Golden Bones led readers to 7 sites where jewels were buried. Gold and precious stones, each a different part of a skeleton. One by one, the tiny golden bones were dug up until only Eleanor's pelvis remained hidden. Worldwide sensation, the quest to find the bones consumed people and destroyed lives. It made Nell's father, Frank Churcher, Nell's father, a rich man. But stalked by fans, unable to tell fantasy from reality, Nell became a recluse. Now the book is being reissued along with a new treasure hunt. A documentary crew are charting everything that follows. During the filming, Frank finally reveals the whereabouts of the missing golden bone, and then all hell breaks loose. And now we have a short video of Erin Kelly to give you a flavour of the book.
Hi, I'm Erin Kelly and this is The Skeleton Key. I'm going to read you an extract from the prologue in which our narrator, Nell, has just given her driver the slip and gone for a coffee with her friends after school instead. I tell myself my jangled nerves are guilt and caffeine and not anxiety about Ingrid. There's no way she'll be waiting for me. This is the first time in over a year that I've broken my after-school routine. For a long time, I would see her through the window of my chauffeur-driven car. Sometimes she'd lean on the road sign. Other times she'd be sitting on a car bonnet or lurking behind a tree, but it's been months since any of us last saw her. There's a payphone on the wall and coins in my pocket. I should call home, tell my parents I gave my driver the slip for his sake more than mine. But that would expose my lie. I walk the last quarter of a mile home on my own. I turn left onto the Vale of Health, the hook-shaped street of Victorian villas at the edge of the heath. It's the kind of place where the houses have blue plaques commemorating the artists and writers who lived here in the 19th and 20th centuries. My house is 1 minute walk down the hill. There are grassy banks instead of pavements, and the lampposts look like old-fashioned gas lights. Our house and its twin are the first two on the left. I'm close enough to see the pink suds of cherry blossom in the front garden. At the gate stands my brother Dom, shielding his eyes as he looks up the road. "They've formed a search party," he shouts, and then with relish, "You are in such deep shit." "Worth it," I shout back and flip my middle finger at him. It's the smell that gives Ingrid away. Unwashed hair and the charity shop funk of musty clothes. "At last," she says, her breath warm on the back of my neck. "I've had my birdie eye on you." Before I can think, birdie, the knife goes into the top of my thigh. It feels more like a punch than a cut, and my legs grow hot. There are 3 more slow punches. When I fall, Rose swoops from nowhere to catch me, and Dom seizes Ingrid. She's wearing a man's dress shirt that's too big for her and a stained pink tracksuit. A vein on Dom's neck throbs with the effort of restraining her. Ingrid can't weigh more than 7 stone, and Dom's tall for 12 and sporty, but this is a struggle of equals. They both think they're trying to save a life. "I need the missing bone," she pants. "I need to put her back together again." "Shut up, you mad bitch," says Dom. He pulls her arms tighter behind her back and she drops her knife. "What shall I do?" asks Rose. I think you're supposed to apply pressure to a stab wound," says Dom. "It stops the bleeding. Take off your jumper, maybe?" Rose bundles up her school sweater and presses it against what increasingly feels like a bruise. "I was only trying to save her," wails Ingrid. A cycle courier leaps off his bike while it's still moving. "Shit, do you kids need a hand?" "Go to the first house on the left," Dom says. "Knock on the door and tell the woman who answers, her name's Bridget, to call an ambulance and the police. Tell them Nell's been stabbed by Ingrid Morrison and we need her up here." "Police, ambulance, Bridget," says the cyclist. He circles tightly around and is gone. When Bridget arrives, her training kicks in. She wraps a cape around me and examines the wound. "Mother of God, she's got the femoral artery. Rose, keep that pressure up." "Did we do the right thing?" asked Dom. "She's freezing." "You both did brilliantly," says Bridget. She puts one hand to my forehead, another to my wrist. "You've killed my sister," cries Dominic to Ingrid. "You should have been locked up years ago." "No," Ingrid shakes her head. "I was trying to save a life. All I've ever wanted was to bring Eleanor back." My last thought as I close my eyes and slide backwards out of the world is how vain is the cause I'm about to die for. For the woman Ingrid is trying to save has never existed outside the pages of a book.
Whoa. So another chilling opening there. And Anna, this book was your selection. So what are your thoughts on the Skeleton Key?
One of the things I love about book club, and this applies to the next book as well, is when you're kind of forced in the nicest possible way to read books that you might not pick up naturally. And I don't think I'd have picked this up. The covers and particularly appealing, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the family dynamics, and it feels like one of those books that's kind of on the outer reaches of crime. So it's not a police procedural. There's not the traditional body that's found. It's one of those ones that doesn't really fit within one of those traditional crime brackets, but is really enjoyable nonetheless. So I loved the main character. I loved her relationship with the child that she's brought into her life, with her own family and this kind of bonkers family dynamics with them and the next door neighbours. And that core story I thought was really unusual about this Skeleton Key. And I don't think it's always difficult with crime, but I don't think it's giving anything away. I think Erin spoke there about, the fact that it's based on this book that people read and they sort of go on this hunt for things, which was a real story, which really happened. And people lost their lives in this mad hunt for these pieces of this puzzle. I think off the top of my brain, I think it might have been the 70s, might have been slightly earlier than that. But so it's based on this real story, and it just felt really unusual, a bit of a a left field book for me, but really enjoyable, a real kind of family epic drama, and also had that dual timeline that I felt really worked, you know, kind of went back and kind of had this real flavour of the days when there was smoking inside and sort of, you know, it just had that sort of sense to me. So I really enjoyed this book.
Okay, I mean, at one point it was a triple timeline, really, wasn't it? Because we had
Yeah.
the 60s with Frank and Bridget, and then the incident with Eleanor, and then present day. So yeah, she manipulated the 3 timelines there, which is, again, that really gave a layer of complexity to the plot. I suppose, yeah, I'll be interested to hear everyone's thoughts, because it's attracted a lot of attention, this book, and varying opinions, which sounds like a good place to go to Gordon.
Yeah, it's got everything I think we should love. There's a mystery, there's puzzles to solve, there's treasure maps, there's warring families, there's disputes, there's secrets and past going forward. We've got some dead people turn up, for some are accidents, some perhaps not so much. It's got everything that should make a really good story, and I've hardly seen a negative thing about it. Everyone seems to universally love it. I mean, just yesterday, Marianne Keyes posted a huge big, "Oh, this book's amazing," and it was lovely to see. It didn't quite land for me, and I know why. As I said, I alluded to earlier, I'm not very good with character names, and I just felt overwhelmed by the cast. I just thought there was too many people for me to keep track of, and that's on me, not on the story, because it's just, I sometimes, I say, just read too quickly. I really liked how the story played out. I liked what happened. I just, at times, I felt I was a wee bit lost with who was who, and as I say, that's on me, so it's not a reflection on the book, but it just didn't. I didn't click with any particular character. I didn't feel this is the person, you know, I want to read about. I want to hear their story. I was just like, I'm quite liking this. I want to know how it's resolved. I want to know, there's a twist I'm not going to get into, but I want to know where this dead body suddenly come from, and is it a dead body? Is it not a dead body? So without doing spoilers, there was just something happened about 150 pages into the book. I thought, oh great, okay, let's see where this goes. But I just slightly felt overwhelmed by all the people coming and going and all the different timelines. And for me, I found it harder to really get sucked into that story, because I was working too hard to keep up with what was going on, I feel. But as a skittish reader who goes through things possibly too quickly, who doesn't really retain character names very well, as I say, that's more on me than on the book, which I love the premise and I love the resolution of it. So I'm kind of like, why am I not loving it more than I do? So, yeah.
It's interesting that a comment from Rhoda Will on Facebook, who says that she really enjoyed the complicated relationships of the characters and that complexity. But yes, it's a long book. It spans 3 timelines and quite a cast of characters. So it's not a fast read, particularly at the start, and it's an intricate read, a beautifully written book, but it does demand a lot of concentration, I think. Sara, what did you feel?
Whilst I said I do love a dual narrative, this was way too long for me. It was such a long book. It could probably have skipped like 100 pages. But with that being said, I enjoyed Nell's paranoia and the sense of her looking over her shoulder through the book. Obviously, because of everything she did go through in her childhood because of this book. But it's also interesting how so much could have changed if the characters would have made like slightly different decisions. So yeah, it's a long one, but It wasn't my favorite, but I did enjoy it.
I did think Nell was great as a character. I thought Nell was really, really enjoyable to read. She was kind of my central linchpin for, obviously, she guides you through the story. I just thought the way she was evolved, her principled stand on not relying on her family was really, really effective. And of course, the drama she's playing out with the daughter she is trying to foster almost as well. There's a whole backstory. She's got her own dramas going on while her family are dragging her into their mess. I thought that was brilliantly done. And Nell was the one strong character I thought, yeah, she's been brilliantly portrayed through this book. As I say, it was the surrounding cast, I think, drowned me out a wee bit.
For sure, yeah.
I absolutely, what Erin Kelly did with Nell's character, I thought was phenomenal.
I quite liked. I really liked a lot of the sort of side characters, and I thought they were really well done. Possibly because I work with artists in my day job quite a lot, so some of the, not the murder stuff, obviously, but some of the other stuff did ring true in amongst the other characters. So I did really enjoy those, those people. So while Nell was absolutely brilliant, I felt that the whole picture was really well drawn, and Nell's relationship with the daughter, but also with the men in her life, was brilliant.
Yeah. Although it had quite cast of characters, they were all so interconnected. It did at some points feel a little bit too claustrophobic, a bit too incestuous. I really liked the idea of the reticulated skeleton. That's sort of like everyone in the story, the way they're all linked together. I thought that was fascinating. What really stood out to me was sort of inevitability of it all, in a way, because we've seen big phenomena like Masquerade that the book was based on, and I suppose the Harry Potter phenomena. All these things grow into absolute monsters, and the toll they take on their creators. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I like that part of it as well. That another part that was picked up and used to great advantage through the story was the following, the people who bought into the story and the treasure hunt and wanted to keep it going. That almost endured for the 50 years of the obsessive fandom and fandom. So that was so core to the story again, and it was used so well. The characters, the sort of the villains to the piece almost, were these external factors that just would go off on rogue tangents, and just the lengths that people would go to get themselves involved in this treasure hunt, and to, I'm struggling for words again, but to win effectively, to assemble the skeleton and get the grand prize at the end. But it wasn't just there was a grand prize, there was a mythical, we're going to resurrect the character from the dead almost. So we're linking a resurrection from the dead from book 2 to the book we're going to come to next as well. So we picked these quite well in that regard. But just the way we had, as I say, the use of these obsessive fans, how they just pushed the story along and then completely took it and ran off in a total different direction, because the unpredictability of them was great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so that was The Skeleton Key by Erin Kelly, which brings us rather neatly to our third and final book, which is Ben Aaronovich's Rivers of London. And what can you say about this phenomenally successful series? Let's just say it's a bit of a twist on the usual London set police procedural. The blurb starts with an excerpt from the book. It says, "My name is Peter Grant, and I used to be a probationary constable in that mighty army for justice known to all right-thinking people as the Metropolitan Police Service, and to everyone else as the filth. My story really begins when I tried to take a witness statement from a man who was already dead. And here's a little clip of Ben Aaronovich to tell us a bit more.
It started at 1:30 on a cold Tuesday morning in January when Martin Turner, street performer and, in his own words, apprentice gigolo, tripped over a body in front of the east portico of St. Paul's at Covent Garden. Martin, who was none too sober himself, at first thought the body was that of one of the many celebrants who had chosen the piazza as a convenient outdoor toilet and dormitory. Being a seasoned Londoner, Martin gave the body the London once-over, a quick glance to determine whether this was a drunk, a crazy, or a human being in distress. The fact that it was entirely possible for someone to be all three simultaneously is why good Samaritanism in London is considered an extreme sport, like base jumping or crocodile wrestling. Martin, noting the good quality coat and the shoes, had just pegged the body as a drunk when he noticed that it was in fact missing its head. As Martin noted to the detective conducting his interview, it was a good thing he'd been inebriated because otherwise he would have wasted time screaming and running about, especially once he realised that he was standing in a pool of blood. Instead, with the slow, methodical patience of the drunk and terrified, Martin Turner dialed 999 and asked for the police. The police emergency centre alerted the nearest incident response vehicle, and the first officers arrived on the scene 6 minutes later. One officer stayed with a suddenly sober Martin, while his partner confirmed that there was a body and that, everything else being equal, it probably wasn't a cause of accidental death. They found the head 6 meters away, where it had been rolled behind one of the neoclassical columns that fronted the church's portico. The responding officers reported back to control, who alerted the area murder investigation team, whose duty officer, the most junior detective constable on the team, arrived half an hour later. He took one look at the Mr. Headless and woke his governor. With that, the whole pomp and majesty that is a Metropolitan Police murder investigation descended on the 25 metres of open cobbles between the church portico and the market building. The pathologist arrived in a certified death, make a preliminary assessment of the cause, and cart the body away for its post-mortem. There was a short delay while they found a big enough evidence bag for the head. The forensic teams turned up mob-handed, and to prove that they were the important ones, demanded that the secure perimeter be extended to include the whole west end of the piazza. To do this, they needed more uniforms at the scene, so the DCI, who was senior investigating officer, called up Charing Cross Nick and asked if they had any to spare. The shift commander, upon hearing the magic word overtime, marched into the section house and volunteered everyone out of their nice warm beds. Thus, the secure perimeter was expanded, searches were made, junior detectives sent off on mysterious errands, and finally, at just after 5 o'clock, it all ground to a halt. The body was gone, the detectives had left, and the forensic people unanimously agreed that there was nothing more that could be done until dawn, which was 3 hours away.
Okay, yet another chilling opening with a headless body, no less. So, Anna, I know you have to go soon, so I'm going to come to you first for thoughts.
Yeah, apologies. I have to run, not actually run after this, but I'm on my holidays in a premiere in Belfast, so we'll be going out after this. But yeah, so again, this is a really good example of a book that I would never have picked up. For a start, when I'd looked at the cover, I actually just thought it was a book about the rivers of London. And had never picked it up any further than that. So what happens with book club is that people suggest books, and somebody suggested this one, and I was quite surprised it was even a crime book. So that was the start of a journey. I would never pick up a book that had any sort of, sense of ghost or magic or, in it. Just does not appeal. Having said all that, I absolutely love this. I also hate a book with any funny in it, Gordon's just taking his thing off. I totally loved it. I thought it was dark and I thought it was funny, and I loved the sense of history, and I really liked the main character and his slightly useless ways. I just, and I don't know, having then mentioned it to a few people, they have said that the books are all of a similar vein. So if you love the first one, then they all follow in a very kind of formulaic way, which has made me not probably rush to read the next one, which I might have done. But as a quirky, different book, I thought it was really well written. I'm with Gordon in that I'm quite a fast reader, and sometimes I lose some of the nuance. And with this, you did need to focus. And I read as I go to bed and go to sleep. So I was finding it, I was like, what's just happened? Because it is quick and it does go through, talk about different timelines, wow. It's fairly linear, but it dips but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed, the sense of these rivers that are, or creatures or beings, and that history. I lived in London for a long time, and I love London, and I miss it dreadfully not living there anymore. So that possibly, helped me really get into this book. So yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you, but I'm going to leave you on a really positive note. So thank you to the Bloody Scotland Book Club for encouraging me to read this, because I loved it all. So
that's a great note to end on. Thanks a lot, Anna.
Thanks,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye,
everyone.
Bye.
So yeah, there
That
you
warmed
go.
my wee heart of stone, that did.
I
That was
know,
great.
I know. Yes, it's really good to hear. Okay, I've had a comment from Rhoda again on Facebook saying humour and gore, what's not to love? And I think that's a good point Anna made about possibly missing things if you go too fast. It was a reread for me, and I definitely did pick up things I probably missed the first time. So yeah, Gordon.
Well,
this was your pick.
Yeah, it was my pick, and the reason, and Anna nailed why I picked it, was to try and get the book club to perhaps look at something they wouldn't normally do, which is one of the things a good book club can do. I love it. I'd forgotten how dark it was at times. There's some really quite shocking scenes, bits which I had forgotten from my first listen. I also did well to find a bit with not very much bad language, because it is more swearing than I remember as well. But it's spawned so many sequels. It's spawned graphic novels. It's really got a life of its own. And again, as Anna touched on it, there's a lot of social history and stuff about London thrown in just as background, which is really interesting too. But I just wanted to say that crime, the point of my picking it was to try and take us that crime's not just there's a police station down the road and there's a dead body and we're going to find out who done it. This really stretches the boundaries of how a crime investigation can go. The first witness is a dead body. It's like Peter Grant meets a ghost, and that's his first interaction with this spiritual and magical world, which takes him off over the course of many books down this path of learning and discovery. So it lets the reader and it lets the principal character see this world, which many of us we don't know about. And if you don't buy into ghosts and magic, then perhaps this won't be the book for you. But as Anna highlighted there, she wouldn't have picked it up, she wouldn't have considered it, but she really enjoyed it. So that's exactly what I had hoped would happen, that somebody would find this and love it and go on and read more books.
No, Sarah, is this something you would have picked up?
Do you know what?
Yep.
Yeah, I've had it on my shelf for years. I have so many books on my shelf that I just never get to because just
time.
No time. But this is really the kind of novel that reminded me of like a BBC drama that I used to watch way before I even moved to the UK. So, and it's what made me fall in love with the UK and England. So I just enjoyed the whole aspect of it being very British, being very focused on London. I lived in London for 2.5 years before I came to Glasgow, so obviously it reminded me of, like Anna said, it was nostalgic, but I really enjoyed it. And I also enjoyed how he gets the job done. Peter gets the job done, but he's not a very good cop. He's just he's not very good at his job. It's like, I don't know how to like say it, but I think his partner Leslie, I think she's the good cop in this, and he is more supernatural. I don't know.
I think at one point Leslie actually says, your trouble is you get distracted, whereas she's the by the book copper with
exactly.
A good thief taker, I think, is one of the comments. And then Peter probably doesn't work that way.
No, but they're a good team, all of them. So, which is what gets the job done. They get together and they solve it and they make it work. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah. One of the aspects I really enjoyed rereading and listening to the audiobook was the sort of laconic, very, very cop-based humor, I think, the very dry humor. And it came across, I don't know if Aaronovich has got contacts or relatives in the force, but it came across as incredibly authentic, just the language used and the procedures. Just there's a quote, recent quote that Gordon actually picked up when we were talking about it, the book club on Twitter, and it was Joyce Carol Oates who said, "Mystery, detective, police or legal procedurals are antithetical to horror or fantasy. If you like one, you will not usually like the other, because traditional mysteries must be realistic. Otherwise, detection makes no sense." So, comments, thoughts? What do we think about that?
Well, Ben replied to that and said, "This has not been my experience," which sort of 8 or 9 books into the series, you can see why he'd wanted to shoot that one down. But that, again, that was why I picked this book, because traditional detective stories or mysteries don't need to be traditional solutions. You can push the boundaries and you can cross over into other genre. And I read a lot of horror, I read a lot of fantasy stuff. I've got more Spider-Man comics coming out in my ears than I can possibly go with. So I'll read across a range of different medium, and there's crime stories and detective stories in there everywhere. It doesn't have to be the traditional, this is the only route you can take if you want to tell a murder story. And this one's wild, but there are crimes happening, there is a policeman investigating, and there's a method and a process being followed. It just takes, like a river does, some strange deviations and twists and turns. So that the timing of Joyce Carol Oates' tweet and Ben's reply was amazing when we're actually looking at the book. And I thought, well, that's exactly why we picked it. And pushing the boundaries, any good book should be pushing boundaries in some way. And this book does. It takes on so many things. It takes on discrimination within the police force at one point, just as Peter's not a traditional copper in the eyes of some of his bosses. So, they're saying, you wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes back in the 80s, would have had drummed you out. You wouldn't have had you wouldn't have been here. So there's that whole institutional element as well that he's trying to throw in. He knows what it would be like for Peter, as we've touched on, isn't perhaps the sharpest tool in the box, but he wants to be good. He wants to be a thief taker. He wants to catch the bad guys, and ultimately that's what you want from any police thriller, is the policeman bringing home the bad guy at the end of the day. And in this case, he's got a very strong supporting cast with multi-talents, so between them they find solutions.
I think what's really realistic is the fact that he has to try really hard to learn, which we all have to do. So yeah, it's good cast of characters.
Yeah, I like the learning part where it's like, right, here's what you have to spend like 2 hours in a room trying to make a wee ball of light, and this is where you start with magic, and you just think, you can almost feel his pain, thinking, I want to be a wizard. But
Yeah,
it's going to be a long.
exactly.
When can I learn this? Maybe in 10 years if you pick up the pace a bit. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
It's that whole managing expectations. But the book, and I know it's also touched on that some people don't like too much comedy through their books. There's a lot of dry humour in this, and a lot of just silly nonsense humour too. But it doesn't feel out of place. I felt it sort of, elevates the story almost. So, and it's a hard balance to get. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But I just feel that Ben Aaronovich has actually, merged it seamlessly to make it feel very much, there's a levity in there in amongst the darkness, and it really balances out very nicely.
That's the thing, isn't it? It is a balance, because you're right, there are some very, very dark bits that I had forgotten. And and not that far into the book, I thought, oh gosh, yes, that's not very nice, is it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the humor is a necessary counterpoint to the darkness, and it feels, as I said, it feels very authentic. This is cop humor, with a dose of magical realism, if you like. I love the series. Spoiler alert: I am a huge fan. I'm seriously into my magical realism, but if you're not, there's still a jolly good detective story to get your teeth into, and a lot of dry humor to enjoy. So I suppose the question is, Sarah, would you now go on to read the rest of the series?
I think so, yeah, at some point. I don't think I would rush into it, mostly because I have so many other books that I really want to read. But yeah, for sure, it's on my very long list. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, from my point of view, I've only read the first one, but I've got a few of the others. So Ben actually came to Glasgow recently, and I got the second book. I met him the day he got it signed, so I have the second book, but I'm kind of scared to crack the spine because it's a signed copy. So I'll be dipping back into audio for that. But it made me, after I read it the first time, want to read more kind of supernatural, crimey stories. And there's a really good series getting going by Adam Simcox, The Dying Squad, which is a similar idea. The protagonist, in this case, the protagonist is dead. And he's almost like a supernatural crime-solving unit, and that felt similar, but without the levity. But it's again a really good cop story. So, that was one that, on the back of reading this, I thought any more the kind of similar ghostly type things, and that one just jumped out at me. I did that on audiobook as well, and really enjoyed it. And narrated by Sophie Aldred, who was a Doctor Who companion.
Oh, right, yeah.
Bizarrely, a Doctor Who companion for a story that Ben Aaronovich wrote. So there we go, nice wee symmetry coming on there. So I am a nerd. But yeah, so just it made me want to read more supernatural crime, which is something I generally hadn't sought out, but there's certainly quite a lot of it out there. So
yeah. Have you read James Oswald? Do you like his MacLean's? Yeah.
Very much, yes.
Yeah.
James is great as well. So,
so
there's definitely, and again, you say supernatural, people kind of shy away from it, but James does it very well and layers it in without making it, without making it pivotal to the story. But there's always that undercurrent of supernatural tension, which again he does really, really well, and it's not always there. You can read a book without really feeling it, so it kind of crops up now and again. You go, oh yeah, creepy one, like that. So yeah, James is fabulous. I really enjoy his books too.
Okay, well, I think that was a really, really interesting discussion. I'm sorry Anna had to rush off, but I really enjoyed that, and I hope you did too. So it's probably time to talk about next month's Bloody Scotland Book Club. And your host will be Lynn Anderson, and the books we'll be talking about are We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker, which has won shed loads of awards, Theakston's Crime Novel of the Year, CWA Gold Dagger. billed as an accomplished and moving story of crime, punishment, love, and redemption. Then we have Hear No Evil, which is set in Regency era Scotland, based on a true story about a young deaf woman accused of infanticide. And finally, Victoria Goldman's The Redeemer. And that is about threatening plaques, vigilante killings in a Jewish community in an English town. What's the link? The clock is ticking to the next murder. So join us on Facebook Live on Wednesday, the 26th of October to discuss what looks like another selection of really, really interesting books. Thank you. I'm Margaret Kirk. Thanks to everyone for coming along and hope to see you next time. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.